showing hospitality, welcoming people, welcoming all people, is one of the major tenets that the United Church of Christ seeks to attend to, seeks to live into. A big part of what we have talked about as a denomination is how we will be welcoming, how we will show extravagant welcome. We have bats that point to that. We have banners. We have all sorts of things that remind us that as a people of faith, we are called to welcome others. We are called to welcome all others. Now, this is not something new. This is not something that somebody in the UCC's public relations department or publicity department came up with. This is an ancient tenet of both Judaism and Christianity, and as far as I know, Islam as well. The faiths grounded in the Middle East found that hospitality, believed that hospitality, welcoming people that you know and welcoming the stranger, was very, very important. It was one of the most important things that people would do for each other. Welcome someone in. We heard that in the story that Melba read from Genesis about how Abraham welcomes those 3 strangers into he and Sarah's household. And in our third scripture passage, we will hear also of a welcoming story. And in it, Jesus both affirms this practice of hospitality and he changes it. Or he alters some of the expectations, or he alters some of the roles that people will play. He does what Jesus often does, taking what we know and shuffling it around and offering what God hopes we will come to see and be. Let us listen. We can offer ourselves, our ears, and listen for the Word of God as it's found in the Gospel according to Luke, reading from the 10th chapter, verses 38 to 42. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." May God bless this reading from Holy Scripture. So we have this, the setting is that Jesus and his disciples they're going from town to town. This is Luke's account, so they are on their way to Jerusalem, and they come into this village. Jesus meets this person, Martha. Martha either knows who he is or has heard about him or whatever, but she invites him, and we would guess his disciples, into her and Mary's house. And they go, "Well, thank you, that's great." So they come in, and what happens, Jesus sits down, and he begins to speak, he begins to teach, and Martha runs off to get a meal together, and Mary sits down at Jesus' feet and listens to what he's saying and what he's talking with his disciples about. And Martha, well, she's off busy getting all these things together, and she comes back in and she sees Mary there, and she's like, Jesus. Except she probably didn't say it with that quick that time. She said, Jesus, can't you see that my sister should be helping me do all this stuff that I'm doing? Will you tell her to come help me? And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to do that. You've become distracted. Mary's doing what she needs to do. And we need to recognize that and realize that. So what has happened? What's happened in this story? Because a number of very significant things have happened. The first is that Mary does something which is really out of character. She breaks a role. Because when Jesus and his disciples come in, the expectation is that she, as a woman, is going to go with her sister Martha and prepare a meal. But she instead goes with the other disciples and sits down and listens. And Jesus doesn't boot her out of there, right? He doesn't say, hey, what are you doing here? You're a woman. He just keeps talking. What we have in this particular passage is one of those occasions in which Jesus not only just sort of looks away, but actually affirms that women are as capable as men of being disciples. And that when we're disciples, one of the most significant things that we can do, if not the most significant thing, is to sit and listen when Jesus is talking to us. And that's what Mary does. She takes on the role of disciple. Now Martha's doing what has been called to do, or believes she has to do. This is her role as a woman in the household. Make the meal. Make the big meal. And we heard that in the Genesis passage. We see that this is common practice. You know, Abraham's sitting out there, the sweat's dripping off his brow. It's the middle of the day. He sees these three strangers. We get the sense that Abraham knows that they're three really significant people, not just three everyday people. But he knows he needs to welcome them. He runs up to them, says, stop. We'll give you a little water for your feet. We'll give you some water to drink. We'll give you a little bread. Then you can pass on your way. And the strangers are great. Thank you. This is just the hospitality that we hope is going to be offered to us. But he goes in and he says to Sarah, look, make cakes. Get them going. Come on, let's go. I'm going to go out and get a fatted calf, and we're going to make this a great big meal. And so off he goes, and we're told he selects the calf, but I kind of doubt that. He probably gets one of the servants and says, that one. Go get that one. You go prepare it. So there's all this bustle and activity, and they come out. They have this great big meal that they bring to these three strangers who are somewhat surprised by it, but welcome the food, welcome the drink, the cakes. And then what happens? They engage in this conversation. But what do the strangers say? Where's Sarah? How come Sarah's not here? We wanted to talk to her too. Well, she's back in the house, guys. She's where she ought to be. In the kitchen. And they're like, well, we have something pretty significant to say, to tell her. She's going to have this baby. And Sarah's in the back going, right. Yeah, I'm this old, Abraham's this old, that ain't happening. And then we have this back and forth, but it's pretty clear that what those three strangers, and we have lots of interpretations of who they are, but they generally revolve around this being God and some other divine beings. They wanted to talk with both Abraham and Sarah. But something got short-circuited in there. And what got short-circuited is that Sarah got so caught up in doing what Abraham told her and what the expectations that her culture apparently had kind of piled on her, that she just busied herself making this huge meal, and she almost missed out on the most important part, which was the conversation that was going to occur, that was to tell her she was going to have a child. So we flash forward to Martha, Mary, and Jesus. So they're in the house. Martha is working off those exact same expectations. She's working out of that exact same role. Oh, here's this important visitor and his disciples. I've got to make this huge, huge meal, and I got to put this out there. And where's my sister? She should be helping me. And she looks out, and there she is. She's sitting and listening. So she comes out and wants Jesus to yell at her sister. But this is where Jesus shifts another role. He says to her, and he doesn't tell Martha, look, you give it up, forget it. You don't need to make this food. You don't need to do all that kind of stuff. No, what he says to her is you've gotten distracted. You're just busy running around trying to do so many things. You only need to do one thing. Just get us one thing to eat, one thing to drink, and then come sit down and talk with us. Because that's what we want to do together. That's why I'm here. So Jesus isn't saying to Martha and all of us who get really caught up in the hullabaloo of presenting a great giant meal for anybody who comes into the house. He's not saying that's not good, that's not worth it. But what he is saying is, if we get so caught up, if we get so distracted by trying to put together this incredibly fantastic meal, we run the risk of missing what's most important, which is talking with the people who are there. Yeah. When we're called to welcome people, when we're called to show hospitality, it's with the hope that we're going to bring people together to actually talk. So we can learn about each other. So we can find out about who this person is. Perhaps it's somebody that we know. So we welcome the people we know. But do we know everything about them? Everything that's going on in their lives? This is pre-Facebook, remember? And even with Facebook, we don't know it all. We don't know it all. We welcome people, and we welcome our friends and our family so we can find out how they're doing. So we can find out if there's something that they need from us. And we tell them how we're doing. And if there's something they can offer to us. We also welcome people we don't know. The invitation, the call to hospitality is not limited to only people that we know. We're called to welcome the stranger. We're called to welcome people we don't know with the same hope that we will sit down with these folks and actually have a conversation. Imagine that. Sitting down and talking with people we don't know and finding out about them. Seeing where they're coming from. Maybe talking about some of the really hard issues to talk about, like religion, or politics, or the economy, or violence. We don't get to do that if we get caught up in running around, putting together a big, big meal. Now, part of what happened is that we got lost. We played the human game of, well, the Smiths, when they welcome the strangers, they put on this great feast. And, we Joneses, we can't be outdone by the Smiths, so we've got to put on a little bit greater feast. And so we get caught up in that. We get caught up in these expectations that it's got to be more and more and more. But it doesn't have to be. One thing is what Jesus says. If you get us something to eat and something to drink, that would be great. Thank you. And that's enough. What we want is to talk. So let's do that. Let's talk. Let's interact with each other. When you welcome me into the house, let's listen. Let's share. There's a long-standing discussion within Christianity, and it's true within the other major religions too. But this, what's more important? What's better? Action or contemplation? Doing or listening? Being involved or contemplating? What's more important? And you know what Jesus says here? Both. It's not one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. They're complementary. Yes, we need to be doing things. People do need to be fed. People do need to have something to drink. But we also need to be listening. We need to be sitting at the feet of God and listening to what it is that God is saying to us. One feeds the other. If we talk a great deal about what we are called to do as individuals and what we're called to do as a congregation, and we respond to that. We make lunches for folks at New Hope. We're growing vegetables so people can get food. We have done, we do the breast cancer walk. We've done numerous things in which we're involved in helping other people. But we also come together for worship on Sunday. We also go to Sunday school. We also have book groups. We also encourage prayer and meditation. And we need both of those things because the listening and the learning feeds the action. It helps us focus on what it is we're being called to do today. It helps us break down those expectations that we often put upon ourselves, those roles we feel like we have to fulfill, when God is saying, nah, you don't really have to. You don't have to do that. This is what I need you to do. This is what I'd like you to do. Thanks for the food and the water. Now, will you go do this? Will you go help with this? We don't hear that voice. We don't hear God speaking to us unless we stop and listen. But God is not only interested in just talking to us. He wants us to take in, she wants us to take in what's being offered and then put it into practice in our lives. Our world has become more and more divisive and divided. And one of the reasons that that's true is that we don't talk to each other. We don't listen to each other nearly well enough. We may engage in surface hospitality, but we don't go deeper than that. And if we're going to heal, if things are truly going to change, then we have to learn how to talk with each other and how to listen. We have to be willing to stop and pay attention. And if we're willing, do that with God, then God will give us a clue, or more than one, a few clues on how we can do that with each other. And that's something we desperately, desperately need in our world today. So let us all be both Marthas and Marys, knowing that's who God created us to be, and finding the ways to live into what we were created to be and to do. Amen.